Good day, ladies and gentlemen of the interwebs. Zombie Force here. This video and what I'm showing you here on the screen will enlighten you on a few things, hopefully. This is the Judiciary Act of 1789. It was established of the United States federal court systems, creating district courts, circuit courts, and beneath the Supreme Court. Remember, it said that beneath the Supreme Court. And it was established by George Washington, the first president. And the key factors, you can read the screen if you like. I'll leave it on there so you can pause the video and read what that has to say. It means that the Supreme Court is essentially the law of the land, we the people. You see, that's us, the Supreme Court. All of us in the United States have to agree on an issue unanimously. You see, we all have to agree on it in full, not in part. And then whenever the Supreme Court weighs in on a certain case as to the request that we should change something inside our law, then it has right to weigh the issues of we the people, which means that everybody says, hey, we're going to start crushing rocks up and putting it between our toes or something weird, and then a certain majority of people says, hey, we want to make this law. Well, that has to be decided by the Supreme Court. Well, even after it gets decided by the Supreme Court that it could pass certain issues to the Constitution, protects the second office, the office of the President of the United States. He has the majority of the say-so, yes or no, which means that the President can say no to some things and piss a lot of people off, and he can have a tendency to say yes to a lot of things and still piss a lot of people off. But, in fact, go back to the Judiciary Act, which separated the powers of the government, you see, and the branches in which they control. And the Supreme Court holds the highest office outside the second office, which is the President of the United States. The third office, however, is the federal court judicial systems, which means gives each state inside the United States a federal judge in each state. But it restricts, see, this is where you have to understand that, it restricts one federal district court from passing a stay order, and it has to be in effect in all districts inside the United States, which is incorrect. That was in the separations of the office. So I'll go back to the recent decision of the Supreme Court, significant recent decision. It was based on the Trump versus CSA, if you guys know about that. But the aspects of the ruling was founded on the limitations of the federal district courts in general, which means that one state and one federal district does not have the supreme law. It doesn't have the right to write its own legislate and to write its own laws. Although it can reach opinions, which means that if the people inside of a state says, hey, we want to make THC products legal inside this federal district, the federal district judge can uphold that and it not be enforced under the Supreme Court law, the federal law. So they have a window to keep all of their civilians inside their federal district happy and satisfied to an extent, which means that they can't go beyond the boundaries of the Supreme Court and the federal laws. They can't write their own laws. They can't get 20 of their districts to come together on a table and make it law. They don't have the ability to change the law. Only Congress, with the oversight of the Supreme Court justices, has the right to change the Constitution, the founders' rules, essentially. So recently, the Supreme Court withheld the complaints that federal district courts were impeding, you have to understand these words, on the enforcement of federal rules and laws, you see. And that's been since 1789. That was the power reserved by the Supreme Court, and the President's administration has control over the big wig, the Attorney General of the United States, and their findings to uphold certain laws, which means that it removed anybody from being, if I'm a complainant and I go into an immigration hearing and the federal district court says, hey, we're going to offer you protection under our district, okay, it means that they cannot supersede the Supreme Court and the federal law of the land. And the President has used this very effectively, the 1789, and it was an executive policies. And it affects the foundation of why we call ourselves the United States, which means that the federal district courts are overridden by the Supreme Court and the federal laws and the highest law enforcement agency in the land, which is the U.S. Marshal's Office, are the ones that control the security and the legalities inside each district, which means that the U.S. Marshal's Office has jurisdiction over the agencies and federal government agencies inside of a state. Okay, so just to bring you up to speed on where this is going, it means that whenever the 1789 Act was brought to the table and the Supreme Court agreed, which removed the district courts, the federal district courts, and their regions from determining whether somebody was going to stay in this country or somebody was going to leave out of this country, you see. They do not make the Supreme Court laws of the Supreme Court to be withheld or upheld. They don't make that decision. They can't escape that. So recently, the Supreme Court, this has been with us within the last couple of days, has decided to bring that to bear, the Act of 1789, which means that it says to block executive policies broadly, restricting the relief to parties in the case and creating more patchwork enforcement of federal rules. What that means is if one illegal goes inside a courtroom and they're to be held as under a stay order, which means that the federal court in that district's offered up some protection in the legal ramifications to their illegalities inside this country. the court offers them up a certain protection. But the court cannot overrule a removal hearing that was set by a federal judge for a removal order. You see, they can't override that. That's kind of like whenever you're locked up in a jail, and whenever you get ready to get out of the jail, and they say, well, you're not getting out because this other jail over here's got a hold on you. Which means that the federal court, district court, can house this particular person inside their district, in that jail, and under some kind of their system. But if the federal law, see, the ball game gets called at the ball field, I say, and it means that one judge previously, in some cases, years back, has already had a court. It was already a judge's decision under all of the rights that they had to be processed under the letter of the law. They've already done that. The judges have says, okay, they didn't come back to their court hearing. They lied on their paperwork. There was something wrong there. So then, at that point, when the judge rules for removal, that means another thing. It has implications. It means that fugitive from federal justice warrants exist on these individuals legally under federal law, not circuit black robe tyrannical federal judge districts. It has nothing to do with them. That whenever the marshals and the federal officers show up to a whatever it is, if they have articulated suspicion that there is a person inside that house, apartment, or dwelling, they do not require that warrant. You have to understand that. It means that this person already had a judicial warrant for removal out of this country years before. He just didn't go. She didn't go. So don't believe everything that you hear, and I'll roll up to some of the key aspects in this ruling, and that's pretty much what they found. You know, you can read it for yourself, but the terminology is easy. It means that if you're an illegal inside this country, and immigration's court has already gave you processed everything that you were due, and then the removal order exists, then you are leaving. No district court, no lower court other than the Supreme Court ruling will change that. And that's what the President Trump and Pam Bondi and all of these other people have been facing in this, which means that the Supreme Court just re-emphasized their ruling. And there's the information if anybody wants to go back and research what I'm saying, and they'll find it to be true. If you are illegal inside this country in any shape, form, or fashion, you will be removed. And no state, no county, no city, no anybody can protect that individual or harbor that individual inside their house, inside it goes back into harboring a fugitive from justice, and you don't want that. You don't want to get involved in that, because that's going to get you some possible charges and some jail time too. So anyhow, until the next video, everybody have a wonderful future, and zombie out.